Greetings, friends. It's Chapo back again on this Monday, November 6th. And just going to get right into it today. Felix and I are joined by a longtime friend of the show, Derek Davison. Derek, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always happy to do it. Wish it was under different circumstances, but...
Yeah, get ready for a fun episode. I guess, Derek, I'd like to let you begin here. And you're a guy who's, in your career of observing empire and foreign policy, I just want to ask you to start things off. Have you ever seen anything like what we're seeing now in terms of like a U.S. and its ally doing something like what Israel is doing to Gaza right now?
The answer I have to say is no. Obviously we've seen the U.S. do some terrible things. The U.S. and its allies did terrible things in the 1980s. I mean, I am an old, so I go back that far, but I was a kid, so give me some slack. But it's a combination of things. It's not just the brutality of what Israel is doing and the complete, and we could talk about, I think we're going to talk about this later, but the complete just disinterest in using any of the considerable leverage that the U.S. has to try and minimize the brutality, let alone, to stop it or give it a pause or anything like that. It's also the fact that everybody's like thrown in the towel on even trying to plausibly explain any of this to people. They're just like, yeah, this is what's happening. I mean, the efforts at like covering up or obfuscating or creating a justification for all of this are so bad. It just feels like everybody's given up even trying, which I think that in itself is something that I'm not familiar with. I mean, to go back to the post 9/11 period, there was a lot more effort going into like, suckering people into supporting the shit that we did after 9/11. Right now, it's just, it's almost its own kind of grimness that we've kind of thrown in the towel on that end.
Yeah. With after 9/11 in Afghanistan, we all remember things like, oh my God, we are going to teach the women of Afghanistan how to have careers. We're going to,
Yes.
we're going to like spread our way of life to all these countries like that. It was a bullshit rationale, but it was some attempt. It was some branch to liberals or, center right people to go, hey, this isn't just mindless revenge, though there also is that. And also, I mean, with those wars, it was like, we're going to capture and kill bin Laden and all these Al-Qaeda guys. With this, Israel themselves are just saying the same thing they've said the last 4 fucking times. We're going to dismantle Hamas and, we're going to show them that they can't do this, which, whether they are capable of dismantling Hamas or not is a whole other can of worms. But now it just seems like every time a hospital is blown up, or a bakery for that matter, it's just, I guess it's some sort of like emotional manipulation tactic where they go, how would you feel if someone like kidnapped your blah, blah, blah?
Yeah. Yeah. The hostages and the human shields is so insane to me, because in no other circumstance would you conclude that, well, the right thing to do is to blow everybody up. Like, these analogies, like imagine if somebody took your kid hostage, or they took a group of children hostage in a school and they were holding out in there. You would not destroy the school. Like, you would not blow it up to smithereens. You would not blow it to smithereens and think, well, we were justified in doing that. Like, you just wouldn't. That logic would not be even enter your mind.
Right. Like, if I had to pick one thing that they've decided for their sales job to everyone else, and that's been picked up by their fans in America, be they official or non-official, it's that bring them home thing. It's, putting up posters of all the hostages. It's highlighting every individual instance where someone rips down the posters. And it just sort of like trying to depoliticize it in some aspect where they're just missing posters. They're just missing posters for these hostages. Why would you take them down?
Right, like ignoring the incitement part of it. Yeah,
right. The incitement aspect and the fact that like okay, well, I don't think you're going to find them in the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
And the fact that like Israel has probably killed all of them at this point.
I mean, yeah, I mean Hamas, and you can take it for what it's worth, but they say they've killed like 60 of them in airstrikes so far, and that's out of 240. I think 240 was the last count I saw. So you're talking about 1 out of every 4 has now been killed potentially in airstrikes. So it's not terribly effective. The sign thing is part and parcel of this like weird fixation that people have. Like 3 weeks into this, when the death toll was already 6,000 or whatever, and you still saw people online like, did you see the DSA statement from 2 weeks ago about this?
Yeah.
Can you believe? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about this stuff for? Like, why is that the front of your mind in this particular moment?
Yeah, when they're not talking about hostages, and they're talking about hostages like, I don't know, it's a bank robbery gone wrong, just divorced of anything. But if they're not talking about them, they're talking about college. They're talking about college campuses, even sketch shows in Israel. Everything they're doing is about how gay college students are and how they love Hamas.
Hi, everyone. We are live on YouTube with Colombia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQH.
H?
Hamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
Columbia Unisemitism. That was some fire.
That was great.
That was yeah. Derek, I want to return to what you said though about how like it seemed like in the first week of this slaughter there was some pretense made at justification or an explanation for what we all saw happening right in front of our eyes, and that's been totally abandoned. And like by way of that, do you remember like the first hospital they bombed and everyone was like, damn, can you believe Israel bombed that hospital? And then there was like a week of fucking debate about OSINT and fucking audio recordings.
Right.
And like, oh, it was a misfired rocket. Oh, actually it was a rocket that was intercepted and then dumped its payload on a parking lot full of people. And it was just like, okay, that was a week ago. They just blew up a pediatric oncology ward today. And
right,
like
they've blown up like
I'm not seeing
12
any
more
OSINT,
hospitals since then.
I'm not seeing any OSINT being offered about any of these strikes of refugee camps, bakeries, ambulances, fishing boats. Like run down the list here, and like there is no effort. It just the bad guys were there.
No, they just on Friday attacked a convoy of ambulances outside of that same hospital, the Shifa hospital, and acknowledged it and said, well, Hamas was riding around in the ambulances. This is the group that has hundreds of kilometers of tunnels under every square inch of Gaza, which makes every square inch of Gaza a legitimate military target, according to the IDF. They have all these places that they can travel safely underground, but they like to get in ambulances with the sirens blaring in the middle of an airstrike, I guess, just because that's a little bit of excitement in their day. And so we had to blow up this convoy of ambulances that was, according to everybody else, the Red Crescent, the UN, like everybody else, literally in the humanitarian community, was carrying patients to evacuate them from Gaza, to get them out through the south into Egypt. And that one was just like, yeah, we did that. And it was Hamas. Who cares? Fuck you.
It strikes me, if there was a coin flip, okay, either this is Hamas guys who are, they're doing what we've all wanted to do. There's a crisis going on. No one's paying attention to the ambulances. They're going to get in them and turn the cherries on. They're like, all right, once in a lifetime opportunity.
I've always wanted to do this.
Hot wired ambulance. Yeah, man.
Yeah. I'm going to run so many red lights. They're like, I know we're supposed to be in the tunnels. I know I'm supposed to get the fucking RPG-29 or the Cornets and like blow up these tanks, but I want to drive the ambulance. It's either that or it's a child who was crushed by rubble. If it's a coin flip between those, like, I feel like anyone would be like, let's not let's not bomb it with F-16s. Let's just, let that one go, even though
let's let it play out, right? Like, let's just see what's going on there.
And like this all happening because, like, I mean, none of this would be happening if the U.S. did not completely sanction every single inch of it. And like we've already said, there are no red lines for the Israeli military. There's nothing we'll do to condition our military aid, let alone cut it off. The best they can do is like bleat out some limp demand for a humanitarian pause, so everyone can hit the showers before they get killed. But like, I guess they're like, I think I'm just so struck with here is like the position of the United States government, which has now isolated itself from the world in a way that like I don't think I've ever experienced. But not just the world. They have the United States government, and particularly the Democratic Party, has profoundly alienated itself from its own voters. Like the weight of public opinion is so opposed to like what is again very obviously happening, a deeply immoral thing, to put it kindly, that the U.S. is a party to. That really is the only reason this thing is taking place in the first place. And I just like the thing that I keep coming back to over and over again is like the most powerful superpower in the world. And we're doing this all we are just like in a murder suicide pact with our closest ally that is a basket case rogue state armed with nuclear weapons and run from top to bottom by terrorists and criminals. I mean, like this just, I really feels like we're in a murder suicide pact with Israel right now. Every time I turn on the TV and it is another horror that I just can't even fathom. It's just like we are isolating ourselves so badly from the world. And it's just like, is this the behavior of a world superpower? I mean, I suppose it is. I suppose this is exactly what empires do, but not when they're not in the the salad days of empire. This is a bad sign of things to come.
No, I mean, the salad days of empire was the Suez crisis when we told the Israelis and the British and the French to knock it the fuck off, or it was gonna be hell to pay. But I mean, the counter argument, and again, this is like how you to me, it's just like mailing it in. The counter argument is, well, do you think Donald Trump would be handling this any better? And like, no, but could he be handling it any worse? Like, what would be going on if Donald Trump was president that isn't going on now? And they're so desperate to grab onto any straw and say, like, look, we did this, we made it better, we made it a little bit better. And there was a quote from an exchange in the White House press briefing today from John Kirby, who's the ghoul, who's the spokesperson for the National Security Council, who said, like, talking to reporters and trying to claim a victory for the Biden administration, said that the Israeli government wasn't going to allow any humanitarian aid into Gaza. So the fact that like a trickle of it is getting in is a huge victory, and it's a sign that Biden's doing the right thing. He's able to put pressure on these guys. This is like sadism. I mean, this is a government that immediately when the attacks happened on October 7th, didn't just start bombing, but announced this total siege, no food, no water, no electricity, nothing, medicine, none of it was going to get into Gaza. And still, apparently, 3 weeks later or whatever, was still on this. Like, we're going to starve these people to death, 2.4 million people. And it took, I guess, every ounce of diplomatic leverage that the U.S. had just to get like 20 trucks a day or 25 trucks a day of aid into Gaza, and I'll get the Israelis to agree to that. We're giving these people $4 billion a year in weapons, and we've asked for another $14 billion. And this is the people, these are the people we're giving it to, the people who want to starve this population to death and have no concern about letting aid in. That's just incredible to me.
And like, I mean, I want to just, the Washington Post today, a Washington Post from yesterday, headline, White House frustrated by Israel's onslaught, but sees few options. First paragraph, as Israel's ground invasion of Gaza escalates, the Biden administration finds itself in a precarious position. Administration officials say Israel's counterattack against Hamas has been too severe, too costly in civilian casualties, and lacking a coherent endgame. But they are unable to exert significant influence on America's closest ally in the Middle East to change course. We're unable to exert any influence on this client state that owes us existence to our largesse and charity.
Right. So the strategy that like the Biden administration took, which I mean, I think everyone can agree at this point is the single worst series of choices anyone could have made in this situation. It's like, charitably described by his defenders as the bear hug strategy, right? Get really close to Israel, offer them tons of support, both rhetorical and material, as if they could be offered more material support. And doing that will be able to convince them to, not make this look too bad. That we'll have some leverage over them, which, has turned out we somehow don't have leverage apparently over a country that cannot exist without tons of outside support, mainly ours. Like, pull the plug and it is withering and dying. But I feel like it was predicated on a very old idea. I think this is one of those things where Biden's extreme age shows. I feel like part of the calculation was, okay, these are the guys that win wars in like 42 minutes. They're incredibly effective and brave and competent. And also, look, Arabs can't think strategically or, do an actual insurgency campaign. They're not the Viet Cong. So look, this thing is going to look ugly. It's going to look bad, but only for like a week. And then they're going to get it done. And then we're on with business. And of course, that's a calculation you make with the Israeli military from 30 fucking years ago that Biden was probably thinking of, as opposed to today, which is they might be losing tanks for years.
I mean, Felix, I want to talk about that. The idea that like they were, I think you're totally right, and taken off guard at how bad this looks. And the thing is, they're now back themselves because maybe they thought, what, this would only last a week or something. They'll kill a few thousand people and then it'll just go back to status quo as usual. And the thing is, if Israel had done that, I think they probably would have gotten away with it. I think everyone would have been happy to go back and, just forget about it. But the thing is, like, they backed themselves into a situation now with what the Israeli goal is here, which is just like genocide. Like, I think it's pretty clear that they backed themselves into a situation where our closest ally is aware of the fact that to pursue its goals effectively, they basically have to kill every single Palestinian.
Yeah.
And then so, I mean, that's the only way that they can credibly win this war. But if by doing that, like, it will seal Israel's fate completely and this country's. And like, that's what I mean by a murder-suicide pact, is like that they have bullshit themselves so far into a corner that like there's nothing Israel can do at this point that they can get out of.
Right.
That, like that they can pretend is something other, but like they're just committed to it now. So it's going to look, if it doesn't look bad now, it's going to, if this is even imaginable, it's going to look worse and worse and worse.
Right. And you can't reasonably look at what's going on now and say that it's anything but, trying to kill as many and make as many leave and, create total vacancy in Gaza so it can be turned into, I don't know, the world's biggest EDM theme park.
Yeah.
Because like, okay, if the goal's to stop Hamas, well, they're releasing 40 videos every day where they're like, it looks like Metal Gear Solid gameplay, where they're just fucking drilling Merkavas. So that didn't do anything.
I mean, and you want to talk about like, as a U.S. taxpayer, like, how does it feel to know that like our billions of dollars in military aid to prop up this absolute basket case client state cannot save the lives of a single person at a rave or living on a kibbutz? But I mean, it can annihilate a pediatric oncology unit. But like, all the money we're giving to the Israeli army, like, they're getting no scopes right now, firing like RPGs that probably cost like, I don't know, how much does an RPG cost, Derek? Like, in one of those rounds, one of those munitions that they shoot at these tanks.
Oh yeah, you're gonna make me Google this because this is not my area. But
it isn't in the millions of dollars. I'll put it that way.
A bit less than the tank that you're destroying. Let's put it that way.
And,
so yeah, you're talking about $1,000, maybe a couple $1,000, and then the rockets are another, couple of hundred. So a little bit more cost effective than the tank that's being blown up.
Can I just point out that the RPGs that we've seen them shoot? I mean, we've seen videos with Cordettes, which are they didn't have those before 2018 apparently, and they're pretty cool. It's it's state of the art stuff, but the RPGs they have, they're RPG 29s that are made in Gaza. So like, just made like you were playing the game Rust, like literally with just like things you found outside.
Yeah, I don't think the Israelis were prepared maybe for Hamas to be able to mount a defense. I mean, you've had them under blockade for 17 years, and I guess the thinking was that blockade is working. Clearly, it was not. It's worked in the sense that they've kept the civilians in Gaza in misery. I mean, they've denied them any chance to build a functioning economy or have a decent standard of living. But clearly, it hasn't done much to limit the capabilities of Hamas to fight this kind of asymmetric, irregular conflict, which they seem to be doing fairly well at. I mean, I hesitate to pronounce anything, but it does seem like they're holding their own, at least.
Yeah, Derek, I feel like a huge factor in both Hamas's success, at least with on the ground, versus tanks, versus whenever the infantry sometimes wants to leave the tank and leave the Merkaba entertainment console and pause their episode of fucking Yellowstone.
Oh my God! I would love to
Boss
see
Legacy out now on Freebie, season 2.
That was amazing. That was fucking amazing. That they literally have a fucking Roku in that thing. Like, what the fuck? But like, okay, that and like 10/7 itself and like all of this shit. It seems like at this point, the catastrophic racism of the Israeli intelligence services and military literally got them killed, because they legitimately do not believe that like Arabs can think strategically and like fool them and be brave or innovative or any of these things in battle, or like use deception. They just thought of them as like just animalistically sprinting at them wearing a suicide vest, and that is very much not the case.
I think it's an element of institutional capture, because you've had the politics of Israel shifting further and further to the right as the settler extremist community becomes more and more politically powerful, to the point where now they're in control of the government effectively. I mean, ostensibly this is a Benjamin Netanyahu-led government, and he's not of that community, but he's beholden to them for keeping him in office and keeping him out of prison. So they have a good deal of leverage. Now, they're reliant on him to have an entree into power, but still, it's very much a mutual dependency. And that crowd was more interested in diverting military resources to the West Bank to support this slow-moving annexation, to support these settler mob attacks on Palestinian villages and depopulating them, to give people more homes to move into, than it was in monitoring what was going on in Gaza, or maintaining a presence at the security barrier that could have, if not stopped this before it got to those kibbutzim, then at least have responded in a relatively expedient way, which they clearly did not.
Like, in terms of the propaganda videos that we're seeing from the Qassam brigades that we've alluded to, like Felix said, like the sort of the Metal Gear Solid quality of like these guys popping out of tunnels and just no scoping tanks, like point blank range, more or less. I'm wondering, Derek, like as the so-called ground war begins, I've seen a lot of commentary on the fact of like, isn't it totally suicidal to send armored division or like armor into these dense urban guerrilla war environments without any infantry cover? What explains the fact that there is no infantry cover of IDF soldiers, like boots on the ground, shall we say? It's like boots inside a tank, but then like these RPGs turn it into a fucking, like go through it like a fucking soda can. So like, what do you think accounts for the Israeli ground war strategy so far?
So yeah, it is suicidal to send a tank or a column even of tanks into an environment like Gaza without any infantry support, because as you see in those videos, some guy can just pop up behind them with an anti-tank missile, and that's it. That's lights out. And if there's no infantry around to see that guy or take him out before he fires the anti-tank rocket or whatever, then you're screwed. I don't have a great explanation for why they're doing this. You would think the Israeli military would know better, except if it's a sense of squeamishness about taking casualties, which I could certainly understand. This is like the U.S. military. The Israeli military has come to be dependent on electronic warfare, airstrikes, drones, not just unmanned aerial vehicles, but all over on the ground. They've got these. They supposedly had these unmanned machine gun towers around the Gaza fence, which were defeated obviously on October 7th. But they've come to be very dependent on these kinds of things, and that I think is part of not wanting to bring home any stories of mass casualties and feeling like the public can't sustain that. It's not part of the narrative that we're trying to tell. In the U.S. case, it's we've tried to assure, our government has tried to assure the U.S. public that like we can manage empire. It doesn't have to touch your life. You're not going to be at risk. Nothing has to change for you. Just let us and our all volunteer military, which increasingly is again based on these unmanned systems rather than risking any human lives. For the Israelis, the narrative was the occupation doesn't matter to you. It shouldn't matter to you. Let us deal with that. We can ignore the Palestinians. We can make peace deals with Bahrain and the UAE and potentially the Saudis, which is where things were going before all this. And you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just put it out of your mind. Don't make it a political issue. Just let us deal with it, and we'll deal with it in the lowest cost, lowest risk way. And I think now they're gun shy about. There was an article or something I read maybe yesterday about how they're not going to go into any of the tunnels. All these tunnels that Hamas has that they're supposedly going to have to go in and smoke them out to finish the job and dismantle this organization. They're not sending any soldiers into the tunnels because they're afraid that they will take heavy casualties if they do. And so I just think it's a squeamishness about puncturing that narrative of, this is all hands off. It's not anything that will affect your life. And if you start to see a lot of bodies come home, then it's hard to keep up that facade.
I mean, leaving aside the morality of either side or the justness of any cause worth killing or dying for, I mean, like in the Israeli versus Hamas propaganda war, I mean, like one cannot help but note, like I know I showed Felix this, but like to counter the dozens of videos of guys literally like running up to a tank, reciting the Quran, placing a munition on the side of it, and running away as it explodes. The Israelis countered that with a video of a dog. They put a GoPro on a dog and had it run in a tunnel.
And it was a training video. It turned out to be a fucking training video. It wasn't even a real thing.
Even if it wasn't a training video, that as a response, like videos of on the Hamas side by the Qassam brigades, some of the coolest shit we've ever seen. Like, I hope everyone can admit that, no matter what side. Like, even if they don't care, it's like, you got to look at these videos and go, that was awesome what that guy did. That was so fucking cool. The one where the guy pops out of the fucking tunnel and just drills the tank from 30 meters away. Like, these are incredible videos. They serve an incredible propaganda purpose, but their response to that, to the destruction of a cumulative billions of dollars of equipment destroyed, officers killed, morale tanked, is our dog bit this guy. Even if it was real, what the fuck are you doing?
I don't know if they did that. There is this like Western, I think, deep Orientalist belief that like Arabs are afraid of dogs or something, or there's something about, like Muslims and dogs that they're scared of them. It's the same thing as like, when a terrorist incident pops off in the West or something happens and you get some guy who throws a pig's head at a mosque, like that's going to make everybody in the mosque melt into pools of liquid because they looked at a pig's head. Like it's this fucked up kind of Orientalizing thing, I think, on some level.
Well, a memo to the Orientalists out there: the Muslims, they are foe to dogs, but friends to cats who can never be defeated. Cats will never be defeated or walk on a Quran.
Yeah, I like the idea of one of those guys trying to like project the Beethoven movies on the side of a building to demoralize them. Look at this, you bastards.
I guess we talked before about like the potential for this to spiral into a much larger regional conflict. And I'm wondering, Derek, did you see the thing today about how the Houthis launched drone strikes against Israel today and had, like sent drones across Saudi Arabia to hit airports and military bases in Israel. Like, first of all, like, how credible are those reports? And like, what do you make of the Houthis seeming to, jump both feet forward into this conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of glanced at them. I haven't had a chance to really like digest what they're saying. But is it plausible? Yes, it's plausible. It depends on, a lot of things. You have to wonder if the Saudis knew that they were doing this or detected them and said, it's not our problem. Nothing we have to worry about, because of course they've launched drones and missiles through, kind of up the Red Sea previously. And the U.S. at one point, was a little missile barrage. The U.S. shot them down. The Israelis have used their air defenses in the Red Sea, and so it's interesting. They went over Saudi, and does that mean that there was some level of like, let's look the other way, nothing to see here, and let this happen, or did the Saudis just not know that they were doing it? That's one question that I would ask, and I would also then follow that up by saying that's a concern for the war in Yemen getting started again. I mean, this is a war that's been dormant since last April. They were in ceasefire, then the ceasefire expired, but they still haven't started, resumed fighting yet. If there's a miscalculation, if the Houthis do something like that and there's a miscalculation, you could really have that war kind of kicking off again, which I don't think anybody wants. So yeah, it's interesting that it's an interesting development. I think the Houthis are. I saw some video where one of the Houthi senior commanders was like, we asked the Saudis to let us like march through Saudi Arabia to get to Israel and like carry out the fight. And they said no, but we were really excited.
That's a tough march. That's like, a tough march to do. It would be a tough
march. Yeah. So, I think it's the regional, I mean, still the biggest concern I would have in terms of a regionalization of the conflict is Lebanon and Hezbollah. And that was put somewhat to rest on Friday when Hassan Nasrallah gave his first speech about the situation in Gaza since it started, and kind of punted, kind of said, we're doing our part. We're, kind of keeping them occupied here on the border, but we're not going to escalate at this point. We could still at some point, but it was clear that
I think like the tenor of the comments are basically like, we're 100% ready for like an Israeli and U.S. like attack on Lebanon and Hezbollah, but like we're basically keeping things buttoned up.
Right, we're going to keep doing things. You're going to keep it at the level that we're keeping it at now, which but I think he did reserve the right for to escalate if the situation in Gaza gets worse. But he's they've laid out a couple of times a sort of red line. The ground there was a ground invasion was supposed to be a red line, and I don't think they have a lot of latitude because of how just completely fucked up Lebanon is. I don't know that they have a lot of latitude to operate here without, being provoked into something.
So I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about blasphemous as it may be, like domestic politics and like how this factors into, like everyday politics here in this country. And like, I'm not the only one, but like, I can't help but be struck by the comparisons between Lyndon Johnson and Joe Biden at this moment, except Lyndon Johnson, Felix, as you pointed out, had the great society, and Biden just has kind of the meh society. But like, yeah. I mean, just like the image of probably 250,000, overwhelmingly, I would say 99% of them, Biden voters marching in D.C. against a war being prosecuted by a Democratic president, going into the election is a year from today. And it just, once again, like murder-suicide pact here. What do the people in charge of the Democratic Party think? Like, what do they think their prospects are when 80% of their own party is profoundly morally opposed to what the president is doing right now? Like, I just am at the point right now where it's like Biden has got to go. Like, I mean, I said that years ago, but like at this point, like there are DNC staffers breaking ranks. They're members of the State Department. I mean, like, it astonishes me that they think that they can keep this going.
The State Department guy who was part of his job was like authorizing weapons sales was like, yeah, this is too much for me. Like, damn, that's a pretty profound statement. Yeah, I think, the LBJ comparison is like, we got Medicare and Medicaid out of LBJ. This time around, we got like a slightly improved child tax credit for a year before they took it away. It's a bit of a difference. Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking, except that they might still be thinking like, Orange man bad. Everybody will come back. Like they're going to get over this. If it's
I saw
Trump,
a poll yesterday that said that
it's not going to matter.
Biden is trailing in every swing state, and that like an unnamed generic Democrat would completely reverse that phenomenon.
Yeah, like the overall poll was like Biden -5 in all the like battleground states combined cumulatively. But if you replace him with unnamed Democrat, which of course any unnamed Democrat is better than any actual Democrat, so
Right.
it's going to poll better. But it was like +8. I mean, it was like a 13-point swing in favor of the Democrats in that scenario.
Yeah, it was a massive swing that began entirely with this. It was like a 10-point swing in some cases. It was fucking incredible. I mean, I really have to say, I never expected to see a swing like that in presidential politics based off a foreign policy event that wasn't like, the Afghanistan stuff, right? Something where American voters take in actual disgust to something that one of our allies is doing. I mean, this has really been a year full of things I never expected to see, but it just, he's at a point now, just, Bush after Katrina, Carter after he tried to explain Christopher Lash to America, like just all these all these definitive collapses in various administrations. And what is he going to do to claw back? What does he have left? I mean, invade Tel Aviv? Whoops, I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think the tenor.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why I think the tenor of their public comments has changed so much over the last week and a half or so. I mean, what was it? 2 weeks ago, you had Kirby doing, press conferences where, they were asking him, what do you, is the administration concerned about the high level of civilian casualties? And his response was, hey, look, man, this is what happens in war. Like, fuck it. What do we,
and also, we don't have any reason to believe the numbers.
Yeah. And also that, I mean, that felt like the low point. I mean, I feel like that started something in the administration where they were like, holy shit, like people are really mad at us for this. We have to like come out more forcefully in favor of this invented half measure that we've come up with of the humanitarian pause instead of the ceasefire. But we have to like really lean into it and say we're exerting all the pressure we can, and we just can't. Our hands are tied. We're one of the victims here, just like the Palestinians. Like it's just I do think that they on some level realize that this is costing them, but they don't know how to pull out of it now, and maybe they can't because they've already gone all in.
Can't. They know they can't, and they know that they're not going to do the thing that would like actually assuage people's anger over this, which is change course or bring the Israeli state to heel. To tell them to stop doing this, or I don't know, maybe enforce a no-fly zone over Gaza. But like, I think it's their shock at how none of this is working. And like to go back to the propaganda war for a second, all of the arguing over the videos we've seen over the last couple of weeks of people ripping down missing posters in New York City, to me, is like a microcosm of everyone's surprise that like this doesn't work on anyone anymore. Because I mean, this is another thing that's hard for me to imagine. Like 10, 15 years ago, I would imagine like the moral shaming of like, how dare you? These are people. I have family in Israel. Like, how could you be so callous or whatever? I think people would have sort of cowed under to that because they think, well, gee, I'm not a bad person or whatever. But now, like these videos are like counter propaganda for Israel because like all they show is just regular normal people, like a halal cart vendor, just grinning ear to ear and giving the double thumbs up as some guy attempts to berate and shame him. It's like nobody gives a shit. No one cares.
Doesn't work. Yeah, it does not work on people anymore. People can see everything with their own two eyes. But something with the Israeli PR effort that I think is underrated insofar as they've completely bricked is there's a schizophrenic tone to it. Like, okay, after 10/7 specifically, pretty much for like half the month of October, the line was like most deaths of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. Horrible. How could the left support the Holocaust? How could you support this? Do you Do you stand by, families being killed and all this? Like the usual stuff, right? But then also it will be Israel account will post a picture of like Stewie Griffin being like, I hate that vile woman Lois, but she's nothing compared to Hamas.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they're taking themselves seriously.
Right. It's like, okay, do you take this seriously? Should I? Like, what the fuck are you saying here?
I think it gets harder. I mean, it gets harder and harder to say, how can you criticize us after what happened on October 7th when you've killed now 10,000 people, 4,000 of them children, in your blind rage over what happened on October 7th. It's hard to continue shaming people and make that stick for like somehow ignoring the horrible thing that happened to start this when your response has been so violent and killed, cost so many lives. You just, it loses its potency, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, the only way people could digest these events was through cable news, and cable news had an existing protocol for how they frame airstrikes. Like, I think for a very long time, people legitimately believed that airstrikes, at least by Western, or in Israel's case, a self-proclaimed Western-style country, and all the implications that carries, that they're precise, they're high-tech. A lot of they went through a lot of trouble to note how state of the art the technology behind the airstrikes was. And now, you can talk about that as much as you want, but when you're looking at like the abject fucking human misery and mass death and crying children, you know that no matter what computers are on board the F-16, this is the result. They're leveling this place.
Right. And there is this effort to define away the idea of civilian casualties. And the Israelis have done this in past conflicts. They're doing it now when they issued that evacuation order a few weeks ago, and they've repeated it since then. And they've tried to clear everybody out, or they say they're trying to clear everybody out of North Gaza and get them into the south where they're still bombing, but they're not invading, at least. It's part of the rationale behind that is because if you say it enough, and especially say it loud enough in English for an English language Western audience, you can eventually say, well, look, we've warned these people, 40 times to get out of here. And if they haven't by now, they must be Hamas, or they must be Hamas sympathizers. So it's okay if they die. And I think they've tried to do that, but that's not working either, because you see these images of cratered out refugee camps with kids being pulled out of the rubble, the bodies of kids being pulled out of the rubble. It just doesn't work. And it's also, you talked about cable news. The script on cable news in the past, every time one of these conflicts has happened, or one of these massacres has happened, has been, you have 80%, maybe more, of the guests you bring on to talk about it have to toe the Israeli-US line. And then that remaining 10, 15%, 20% maybe who you bring on for balance, who are usually Palestinians or Arabs. When they come on, you put them through the litany first. You make them denounce Hamas. You make them denounce all this stuff. You have to put them through their paces before they're allowed to speak. And I don't think that works on people anymore either, because there are other ways to get information. You don't have to go through that filter.
Yeah.
And I think I'll say on the death toll, like I've seen 10,000. I'm sure the actual death toll is much higher than that.
It almost certainly is.
The Israeli media, though, and like their running counter of their like KD ratio has it at 20,000 terrorists killed so far in their war. And were that true, there would be not a single person left in Hamas. There wouldn't be a single person firing rockets at these tanks.
You would think, if they were all terrorists. Yeah. The 3-year-old terrorists are the ones you got to really watch out for.
Well, I mean, like, Derek, we're at the point now where I'm seeing like surrogates for the Israeli military and government go on TV and say, can you really say that all children are unarmed combatants? Can you really say?
No, I've seen that.
that NICU ward wasn't in some way complicit in the acts of October 7th?
I mean, I've seen that on, there's been some really wonderful work on this on Twitter. Some really just complete morally bankrupt people talking about, well, the child deaths. I mean, you put child in quotes.
But that's what I
because,
mean is like
Hamas recruits. Yeah.
2 weeks ago, they were saying we aren't killing any children or civilians,
Right.
and this is all propaganda, and the death toll is fraudulent in some way. Now they've doubled the death toll in their own count of it, and are just saying that there are no civilians. They're not even trying to deny what they're doing.
Yeah, Brian Mast, who he's the representative who he served in a unit of the IDF. He's not even Jewish, by the way. I want to point that out. He served in this unit of the IDF that strictly exists for middle-aged men who are usually evangelicals, who are
golf brigade.
Basically. Well, even worse. Okay. It's for middle-aged men who are entranced by IDF babes. Like the kind of guys who, when they look at an extremely pixelated meme on like Uncle Sam's Pissed Off Warriors on Facebook, see a picture of an Israeli Instagram babe go, "You're a deadly enchantress. You'd be the last thing a Muslim ever sees, and he'd be lucky." For those guys, they can join
72 versions that look like you.
Yeah. They join this unit where all they do, because they're fucking middle-aged men, is like donkey work. They just carry around supplies and load them into trucks and shit.
Caddyshack.
Yeah. And every once in a while, the IDF babes will like rap tefillin around them, even though they're Gentiles, to be like, you're righteous among nations. You're helping defend Israel. Yeah. Oh, I will be saying happy holidays from now on to honor your people. And they like Brian Mast was in this unit of just, IDF interns, I guess. I don't know what the fuck this is. But he has the uniform from his service doing this and wears it to fucking wore it to Congress.
Where's the uniform of a foreign army on this floor of Congress? Which is not something I personally give a shit about, but I can imagine someone else making a concern out of it.
I feel like foreign army, at least for what he did, is stretchy. Like foreign UPS,
foreign auxiliaries,
but he he wore that dumb shit to a session, and he made a fucking speech on the floor of the House and said all this talk about Palestinian civilians and children. Would we say Nazi civilians? And it's like,
no, we would say German civilians. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And that is like, if I believed in institutions and shit, I would say that's absolutely like grounds for expulsion. That's like an insane fucking racist, awful thing to say on the floor of the fucking House. Like, just that these people are like biologically terrorists. But no one gives a shit.
I mean, that hasn't gotten like, 1/1,000,000th of the coverage of Representative Tlaib's from the river to the sea, endorsement. So like, that's another good example of where things are at in the media. But again, I just need to underscore that none of this is working. 250,000 of Biden's voters are protesting, the largest anti-war movement since George W. Bush was in office. And it's the Democrats holding this fucking bag right now. And as long as we're talking about them, I have to bring up that like Biden, like I think on some level it is not just cynicism. I think on a real level he genuinely does like and believe in Israel, which is not an excuse by any stretch of the imagination, but it's legible for a man of his age and who's been in the U.S. government as long as he is. Barack Obama, on the other hand, and I got to say, in a week of nauseating media spectacle, his comments to the Pod Save America boys took the cake for me in terms of the most morally reprehensible statement made by a public figure. The thing is, Obama, we know for a fact, doesn't particularly like or care about Israel at all. And if anything, was sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And he's aware of all this and just doesn't care. And has this attitude. What he said to the Pod Jumps is that we're all complicit in this in some way.
And so if you want to solve the problem, then you have to take in the whole truth. And you then have to admit nobody's hands are clean, that all of us are complicit to some degree.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was president for 8 years. I was president for 8 years. Like, I mean, there's a little blood on all our hands.
No, he literally
frankly,
said
we're all to blame.
Yeah.
Like, okay, sure.
And, so I mean, just
he wrote about this in his books. He wrote about it. This is what's so flabbergasting to me. He wrote about this shit. He wrote about the empire. He wrote about all of the stuff that we talk about. So it's somewhere in there. He knows this shit, and yet he chooses to be this institutional, just kind of like, hey, check me out on Spotify. Like, I don't want anything else to. I don't want to say anything else.
Love to hear your music recommendations, Obama. Like in between you saying that, like, on social media, you can only tell one part of the truth, and not the whole truth. Is that we're all complicit in the massacre of Palestinians. And then, like, they're them just sagely nodding, going, "Wow, what a brave, difficult thing to say." It's just like, no, you underwrote all of this. Like, I simply have to stress again: Israel would not exist, nor would it be behaving in the way it is now without 100% U.S. support from both parties.
Can I just say that Obama, he not only wrote about this when Obama was state senator in Illinois, the state senator representing Hyde Park. He went to conferences on Palestine. He spoke there. He knew a lot of people in the movement. It is not just that he knows better. He, at least at one point, knew a lot about this conflict. He knew a lot of the things that Israel did. He knew way more than most people, most elected officials. So his presidency and his posture now is just like especially stomach churning. Like it's sort of like the Reverend Wright thing in a way. He, took these stances or had these associations that they were useful to him at a time. They portrayed to whatever set of voters he was trying to impress, a certain broad set of left-wing sympathies or an awareness of something that other electeds would not have. And then when he wanted to jump up a level to the next smattering of voters, he would very publicly shiv the last person he wanted to be seen with. He's just one of the most shockingly cynical people that we've had in office in the last 50 years.
It's astonishing. And as I was talking about my favorite media hits of this week, I have to give a special shout out to a guy that, we never really do reading series about him because he's just too boring a writer and thinker. But I really do have to give a shout out, a special like Hall of Fame performance this week from Jonathan Chait, who in the space of 2 days wrote one column about how George Bush, got Freudian slip again. He already wrote that column. He wrote a column for New York Magazine about how Joe Biden is behaving Joe Biden is the kindest, warmest, bravest, most moral person I've ever met. And he was saying, Joe Biden is a decent man in impossible circumstances. And then the next day, to commemorate Bobby Knight dying, had a whole column about how Bobby Knight is an immoral monster. It was just like, congratulations, John. What a brave fucking stand. Bobby Knight is an asshole. Like, oh, wow. Thanks. Felix, as you pointed out in the Bobby Knight column, one of the checks against the moral legacy of a basketball coach is that he legitimized Donald Trump by supporting him for president.
Yeah, that part was amazing. He literally says he gave Donald Trump legitimacy by endorsing. Like there was someone who was like, yeah, I don't know. It's like I voted for Bush in 2000. Sometimes I vote Republican, but like this Muslim ban stuff and like some of the stuff he says, I can't support it. And he doesn't seem serious. Wait, the guy who throws chairs and like chokes players, he likes him? All right. I'm on the
yeah,
Trump
that's
train.
it. I got it. It was wild that he wrote that column. It's like, look, I know killing 9,000, 10,000 people is bad. But have you ever taken 3 technical fouls in a game against Illinois and gotten thrown out? Like, you don't know what monster is until you've seen it.
Oh, man. And I don't know.
One of the things in that article is he brags about starting a chant at one of the games he went to.
From the river to the sea, Indiana University will be free.
I mean, talk about a life filled with accomplishment.
Now, I'm tired of this shit. I'm sick and fucking tired of an 8-10 record. I'm fucking tired of losing to Purdue. I'm not here to fuck around this week.
And it's not so much that all of the same clowns who supported the Iraq War are back to tell you about how morally Israel is conducting itself right now. But it's just like, forget the opinion people. It's just the headlines that you see in the New York Times with like, blast that occurred near hospital kills dozens, Hamas says. It's just like everything is just this. It's like a game of telephone. The one this week
was explosion that Gazans say was an airstrike hits refugee camp or something like that. I'm like, what?
As if I couldn't think any lower of American journalists. Like, it's bad enough that they're giving cover to this genocide, but like a feature of this genocide is the outright targeting of Arab journalists and their families. Like,
yes.
the conduct of the American media right now is just giving a green light to their colleagues, is green lighting their colleagues and their families as a legitimate conduct of war. I mean, it's staggering. It is staggering. The moral
you have to
vacuum.
ask whether they think of them as colleagues, frankly. I mean, at least at the level of like the elite newspaper writers and cable news guys. Like, do they really view this guy at Al Jazeera or this guy who's reporting for Palestinian?
Well, I can't imagine how that will ever backfire.
See them as colleagues?
I can't imagine how that could ever backfire. I mean, like with our own State Department now greenlighting journalists as combatants in war, and then also hospitals, schools, churches, whatever. I mean, like, if we ever have to fight a war against a reasonable opponent, like I really hope that this doesn't come back to haunt us.
Yeah, you have to. I'm sure it's fine. I mean, we're protected. We're untouchable. That's the attitude anyway.
I thought that we had seen the most disgusting horror of this after the Shireen Abu Akleh killing, where it was like they did the same dance that we saw with the hospital, with everything, where it's like
analyzed this video and it concluded that the angle could only have become from behind her.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow, and the impact point looks like a 7.62 round. That all that shit. And then of course, like weeks later, after it's not dominating the news cycle, they're like, we might have actually done this. Our bad. And then
I mean, and it was like we maybe it was us, but we decided that we didn't do it intentionally. So what do you want from us? We're not gonna.
Yeah,
nobody's gonna get in trouble for it.
And if that was and then they sent police to beat the shit out of mourners at the funeral while they were carrying her.
Literally coffin flopped her. Had riot police coffin flop her at her funeral.
Yeah, just picture any other country in the world doing this. Any other country in the world doing any of this. Like a country in the span of a month hands out assault rifles to racial terror mobs that are backed by the state and guarded.
U.S. provided assault rifles.
U.S. provided. Sends people to the funeral of a journalist they killed to beat the shit out of mourners and tear gas them and arrest them for just no cause. Yeah, just shoots a journalist in the back of the fucking head. Any other country in the world doing this? Any of them? It's incredible. It's fucking incredible.
I don't really have the language or emotional bandwidth to process how much of a coward and a simp you are to support Israel right now. There aren't words for the shame that should bring to you. If you have even a halfway decent thing to say about Israel, or if you feel any sympathy for them, I don't know what to say. I mean, they are, a murder-suicide pact. That's all I'll say again.
And it's sucking attention away from our other wars. So,
well, Derek, I wanted to ask you that. That was the thing I wanted to close out this conversation with, because if leaving aside the horrors of the war itself, but in the geopolitical grand game of things, is there a bigger loser in all of this than the Ukrainians and Zelensky?
So, yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this. I don't think so. I think they stand to lose the most. And I don't want to say that the shift that's happening there, and if people haven't seen it, there was a big NBC News splash last week about, the U.S. and some other European leaders are sort of starting to have some tough talks with their Ukrainian counterparts about maybe having to come to grips with doing a peace deal with Russia and giving something up in the process. It's not just this war. I mean, there are a bunch of factors going on here. The war in Ukraine is a stalemate. Even the commander in chief of the Ukrainian military said that last week, that they're stuck in there's very little movement, and there's not likely to be very much movement anytime soon. So they're in a stalemate. The big counteroffensive didn't work the way that the Ukrainians and the U.S. and company were hoping. And there was obviously no planning for, like, what if this doesn't work? They were putting all their eggs in that basket, and it failed. The political situation in the U.S., as we've seen, is veering between dysfunctional and hostility toward continuing to arm Ukraine in the House. You've got on the rare occasions when they actually have a speaker, the speakers have to promise not to send more weapons to Ukraine. So that's that gravy train is starting to run out. You've got changes in European politics. There was a window there where Poland, which has been one of the most kind of on the Ukraine, on Team Ukraine countries in Europe, they had a complete falling out. Now that Polish government is probably going away, and they'll be replaced with a more Western-oriented government that will probably go back to arming the Ukrainians, but still, it wakes you up to the fact that there are these political changes that can happen on a dime in the West. And it happened in Slovakia, which is not a huge player in this. But again, just reinforcing the idea that all it takes is one election or, one thing to go in a different direction. And Ukraine is suddenly, going to be vulnerable. And that's why, maybe it's time to wrap things up. And it has definitely been amazing to watch. The instant that this started in Gaza, Zelensky start jumping up and down and waving his arms like, yeah, I'm still here, like, everybody don't forget about us. But I think, this is one of many things that has
Israel wouldn't even let him visit the country. Ukraine. They told him to literally go fuck himself.
You gotta feel bad for the guy in that aspect, because he's been in his position, he has to just say, like, everything Israel's doing is good. I support them 100%. It's my fight with Russia. It's the same as Israel's fight with birth rates,
Yeah.
And like when he went to Israel, do you remember that? They fucking hated him.
Yeah.
They were like,
it's been a really, challenging relationship for him.
Yeah. Like, they were like, first of all, put on a fucking suit. second of all, fuck you. And he his time in the sun is over. And again, it does. All the people who screamed last year, no, there should never be negotiations. We need to push this as far as it can fucking go. Okay, what about now?
I mean, the terms of the deal being offered now are probably a little worse than the terms being offered in 2022.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You have to think so. I mean, that the terms of a deal that you could have gotten last year after the Ukrainians had taken back all the entire northeast of the country and had driven the Russians all the way back almost to the original Donbass segment that they were, they controlled. And if you had struck at that point and said, what kind of deal can we make right now? You have to believe that the terms would have been more favorable than whatever they're going to get at this point, when Russia is really, if there is an edge here, it's on Russia's side, because they can survive a stalemate a hell of a lot longer than the Ukrainians do. They have more men, they have more materiel. There's no question that in a conflict that's just frozen like this and kind of everybody's groping for an inch here and there, the Russians can outlast the Ukrainians in that contest. So they've got the leverage now.
Yeah, the Russians also have the advantage of not having to depend on like who's speaker or who's president. And like, God, just like think about all the people who have died since that point in 2022 when they
Right.
could have negotiated
For
It's
nothing. Yeah.
nothing.
And look,
It
I mean, it's not
fucking
like any,
sucks, dude.
and it's not like it's any like endorsement of Vladimir Putin. And I know the conduct of this war is very different than the one taking place in Gaza. But the fact that the Israeli military has already killed more civilians than Russia has in the entire conflict in the span of less than a month is sobering. And it's certainly like
Yeah.
it puts into light the moral commitments of the United States government. And I guess like Zelensky and Ukraine, I mean, could provide here like this is a bit of a warning to Israel and our other client states who get gassed up on our, you know, diplomatic and military cover, is that anything we give you is a poison chalice to drink from. And like, you know, whether it's the state of Israel, like if it's entirely contingent on US support, well, I got news for you. Like, it's not going to be there forever the way things are going. And they're only, and I said, like, I think they're aware of that. And I think they know that, like, their only option, aside from, I don't know, not killing people and living peaceably with their neighbors, is to kill everyone possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's to kill or at least put them someplace else, put them in Egypt, put them wherever, but not to have them in Gaza. I think that's clearly one of the options on the table that's being kicked around, despite the fact that there's a lot of opposition to that outside of Israel. I just don't. I mean, they themselves, I don't think, know how they want this to end, and that's definitely one of many possible scenarios.
Yeah, and in the event that it is like, okay, this is it, we're going to kill as many as possible and expel more with the goal of like, you're gone, this is it, final solution. How does that like not turn into a regional war? That really forces everyone else's hand. Because, like, if you don't intervene then, you know, if you're Hezbollah or if you're Iran, then, like, then you're never going to do it. You kind of lose all legitimacy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's a point where you push this to the point where the Iranians, who are, you know, ultimately the threat that everybody's talking about, feel like their credibility as protectors of the Palestinians, as, you know, kind of the anti-colonial, anti-Western force in that region, is going to be gone if they don't do something.
Yeah, and that is especially horrifying. You know, if a large regional war wasn't scary enough, Israel's policy, if they experience a devastating enough military defeat, is the equivalent of punching your monitor after losing a CS:GO game. They will just randomly nuke a country in the vicinity. Like, just drag everyone down with them. That is their.
I mean, I think
policy.
the Samson doctrine is a very like it's not. I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm not going to predict it, but like I would say, the Samson option is one I've been thinking about as I ponder the death spiral of both Israel and America right now, because they're quite clear on that. You know, if they can't have their toy, then they're just going to break it, and no one else will have it.
I mean, there was an actual cabinet minister, their minister of heritage, I think, who said in a cabinet meeting that, you know, nuking Gaza is on the table. Netanyahu kicked him out of the cabinet and like said you're not allowed to be in the cabinet until the end of the war. Like, shut the fuck up. But it's out there. I mean, it's clearly something that people are talking about.
Yeah, the idea that it's like, how are we going to get the $14 billion to them after? I don't care if he was kicked out of the cabinet. Like, how are we giving them money after that? It's
all of this. I mean, how are you giving them money after they said, we're not going to let these people have water?
Yeah.
How are you giving them weapons after that? Like these, how is your approach to this conflict? On the one hand, we're going to give them an extra $14 billion in weapons, while at the same time, we try desperately with every, you know, ounce of persuasion in us to convince them not to slaughter everybody. Like, what? How do these two things coexist in somebody's brain? If you have to go to those lengths to stop a complete massacre, then you shouldn't be arming them. Like, what the fuck?
All of it, the entire thing with it is, yeah, obviously that first and foremost, but like, also, is Israel's problem that they don't have enough military resources? You know, that's always what struck me about that. Like, is that the problem here?
I mean, and their response every time a U.S. politician or a pundit or somebody suggests that maybe we should condition aid on creating a Palestinian state or human rights or something, their response is always like, yeah, go ahead, we don't need it anyway, go ahead, we'll just be free to do whatever we want then. I'm like, okay, like at least I won't be bankrolling it. At least I'm not going to be underwriting it anymore.
I mean, is there any politician who's willing to fill the void of finding out what happens when we do cut them off, and like is willing to reap any potential political benefit in this country for doing so? I mean, like I said, like if you or your relatives are like partisan Democrats and you're really interested in there not being a second Trump presidency, then like the most important thing you can do right now is be protesting against this war and be demanding that Biden resign. Because I mean, like there's no turning back for Biden. Like at this point, like the only honorable thing for him to do is resign. Like, I mean, change course, but resign, because like he can no longer be the leader of this country, or much let alone a party that supposedly represents progressive or liberal values. Like,
the only thing that Biden could possibly do would be like to send like a detachment of Marines into Israel to disable all their nukes. That would be the only way he could like separate himself from this policy.
And I'll say, like, I mean, fuck the election. I mean, like, I think if you're listening to the show, you probably know where we're at on that. But it's just like, if you would like to, I don't know, like, protest to save lives in Gaza if you're in the West, like in America or Europe, but like, protest because you could be saving your own life at some point in the future if we don't end this shit now.
Yeah, I mean, it's out of control. I mean, this is going to redound back on us in some big way at some point. We're not even going to know how or when, but you don't get away with this kind of shit without some kind of backlash.
No, and like, and the thing is, like, we get away with so much shit. We get away with so much murder and horror, but this is categorically on another level, and it's happening in front of the entire world's eyes, and there is really no turning back from it at this point. I mean, no, look, we can turn back from it anytime if we wanted to, but like what we've done so far, we're never washing that away. Even if we did a 180 right now, and that would involve the resignation of Biden and his entire cabinet.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that.
I guess I don't have anything else to say for the rest of the show as well. Let's wrap it up there. Derek, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us for another fun-filled
happy episode.
Yeah, another happy Chapo happy hour we're doing on Mondays now. But Derek, obviously, American Prestige still going. People want more Derek Davison. Where should they go? What should they do?
American Prestige, AmericanPrestigePod.com. Foreign Exchanges is my newsletter. Foreign Exchanges, one word, .news, or fx.substack.com if you're still using that. I guess, Substack, it's all a rich tapestry, but still, I'm still there. So,
well, the newsletter is still great, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to make sense of what's going on in the world, often in parts of the world that don't make the headlines.
Before we sign off, can I just say like a quick, I know we've talked about a lot today. We've had some laughs, but this is a sad day. I want to say rest in peace to my friend, our friend, really. This guy was a friend of the show. Captain Yair Edu Netanyahu, a.k.a. he was called called by his underlings Captain Netanyahu, but his friends called him Dangerous Sniper.
Yeah, dangerous. What a fucking nickname, man. I mean, that is
Dangerous Sniper.
Netanyahu's nephew, he's called Dangerous Sniper. I mean, American Sniper was already taken.
Yeah.
Philadelphia Sniper, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. Sputnik's the only place that's saying he was killed, so like who knows? But Dangerous Sniper is so fucking funny. That's his nickname. What the fuck?
Like maybe they do this with everybody. Like the guy who's on the radio is like good radio man. Or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe that's just how they do nicknames in the Israeli military.
Look, as we've seen from their number one satire based show in Israel, their penchant for nicknames and humor leaves a lot to be lacking, leaves a lot to be desired.
Oh my God!
All right. R.I.P. Good Sniper, and thank you again to Derek Davison for joining us today.
Condolences to his best. Condolences to his best friend, Good Gunman.
Kojima is involved with the Israeli military.
The demolitions expert, big explosion man. I mean, all the guys in the unit. It's great.
Thank you, Derek.
I'm working on a screenplay about all these guys called The Rude Dozen. All right. Till next time, everybody. Bye-bye.